You're standing at a pharmacy counter at 6:52 p.m. The pharmacist tells you your card was declined for a $38 antibiotic, the ear infection you've been putting off for a week. Behind you, a line of 4 people is watching. You feel your face go hot. You tell her to just cancel it. You'll come back Friday after payday. You won't. You walk out into the parking lot with nothing in your hand. You sit in your car for a minute before starting it. You check your bank app out of habit. $11.42. Rent is due in 6 days. You laugh quietly at nothing. Then you remember the ticket in your glove box. Bought 2 weeks ago on a dare from your coworker. You never even checked it. You pull it out mostly to throw it away. You open the lottery app instead. You scan the ticket. The screen loads for 2 full seconds. Then 6 numbers appear in green. All 6. Matching. You stare at it so long the screen dims and locks itself. You unlock it again just to make sure it was real. It's real. $600 million. Your hands are shaking so hard you drop the phone in your lap. You sit in a pharmacy parking lot, engine off, $11.42 to your name on paper, and on your screen, $600 million that no one else in the world knows about yet. Not your mother, not your sister, not the coworker who dared you to buy it. Nobody. You have maybe 10 seconds before your first instinct kicks in. And your first instinct isn't joy, it's fear. Because you already know what happens to people who win this loud. You've seen the stories, the cousins who reappear, the lawsuits from people you've never met, the reporters parked outside a childhood home, so sitting there, engine still off, you make a decision before you've even processed what you won. Nobody is going to know this came from you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The 48 hours that set the rules. You don't sleep that night. You spend it reading instead. Blind trusts. Anonymous claim laws. The 7 states that let you hide your name entirely. Yours isn't one of them. So you learn about a workaround. Claiming through a trust registered somewhere else with a trustee's name on the public paperwork instead of yours. You don't search for the best lawyer. You search for the hardest person to find. 6 hours away, different state, different world, a woman whose business exists because people need to disappear. She doesn't congratulate you. She doesn't even smile. She just asks one question. Has anyone else seen the ticket? You say no. She nods once. Good. Let's keep it that way. You drive 6 hours to claim it in person, at an office with fluorescent lighting and a security guard who looks bored. A man in a cheap tie verifies the ticket twice. The second time, his eyebrows move, just slightly. That's the first crack in the world you used to live in. You take the lump sum. $347 million after tax. It lands in an account with a name on it that isn't yours. The Solent Holdings Trust. A name Renata picked because it means nothing, connects to nothing, and Googles to nothing. You drive home with the radio off. You walk into your apartment. Same couch, same water stain on the ceiling. Same $11.42 checking account balance untouched, exactly as it was yesterday. That's the whole plan. Change everything underneath. Change nothing on the surface. Learning to perform your own life. The first week, you go back to your job at the call center. You take the same bus. You eat the same $3 gas station burrito for lunch. When your coworker Theo, the one who dared you to buy the ticket, jokes about how he never checked his numbers, you laugh along and say you didn't either. That's the moment you understand the real cost of what you've done. It's not the money, it's the performance. Every conversation now has 2 versions running underneath it. The one people can hear and the one you're protecting. You start small. You quietly pay off your own $4,200 in credit card debt in a single transfer that Renata routes through a shell account, so it doesn't touch anything traceable to the trust directly. You tell Theo you got a signing bonus at a new job you're starting. He believes you instantly, because why wouldn't he? 3 weeks later, you put in your 2-week notice. Nobody questions it. Nobody ever questions an ordinary explanation. You move 2 hours away to a city where your face means nothing to anyone. You rent a modest 1-bedroom under the trust's name. You buy a 6-year-old Honda in cash through Renata, never in your own name. By every visible measure, You are a broke 26-year-old starting over in a new city. Every sunrise is expensive now, not because you spend money, because the money keeps arriving whether you wake up or not. While you're brushing your teeth, the fortune grows. While you're stuck in traffic, it grows again. You stopped working for money. Now money works while pretending you don't exist. You eat instant noodles that week out of genuine habit, not performance, and you catch yourself doing it and almost laugh at how strange your own life has become. The first thing you can't buy. 2 months in, your sister Priya calls. Her salon, the one she's been building for 6 years, is 3 months behind on rent. The landlord's given her until the end of the month before he releases the space to someone else. She's not asking you for money. She'd never ask you for money. You make less than she does, as far as she knows. She's just talking it through, the way sisters do, half crying, trying to sound like she isn't. You have the exact amount she needs sitting in an account with your name nowhere on it. You could fix this in 4 minutes. You don't, because the moment help arrives from nowhere with your fingerprints on the timing, someone eventually asks the question you can't survive being asked. You call Renata that night. You tell her, I don't care about the paperwork this time, just make it invisible. She sets up a small business grant, the kind boutique landlords sometimes offer struggling local tenants to avoid vacancy. Routed through a foundation the trust quietly funds, one with a name that sounds exactly like 100 other small nonprofits. 17 days later, Priya calls you, breathless, saying her landlord's rent is covered for the next year through some grant program she'd never even heard of. She asks if you did this. You tell her no. You tell her maybe the landlord felt guilty. She believes you because you've spent 2 months becoming someone people believe without question. You hang up the phone and sit in the dark for a long time. You solved her entire crisis, and the version of you she's grateful to isn't you at all. It's a stranger with your money and none of your name. The person who almost finds you. 5 months in, a local news site runs a story. Who won it? Investigating the $600 million ticket sold at Value Mart on Route 9. You read it standing in your kitchen, heart pounding. The reporters trace the winning ticket to your old gas station. She's interviewing the cashier, the store owner, regular customers. She's built a short list of people who bought lottery tickets that week based on loose receipts and secondhand memory. Your name isn't on it. Not yet. But Theo is quoted in the article, offhand, almost a joke, mentioning he dared a coworker to buy a ticket around that time, a coworker who left the company not long after. You read that sentence 4 times. Your hands go cold in a way they haven't since the pharmacy parking lot. You don't call Theo. You don't do anything that could look like reacting. You call Renata instead, and for the first time since this started, you hear something close to concern in her voice. She tells you journalists chase stories like this for weeks and then move on to the next headline unless something actually confirms it. Nothing has. Not yet. You spend the next 10 days barely sleeping, refreshing that website obsessively, waiting for your name to appear in a follow-up. It never does. The story runs one more update. Winner remains unclaimed publicly, trust confirms prize was collected, and then it disappears, replaced by the next week's news. You exhale for the first time in 10 days, but something in you has changed permanently. You understand now that the secret isn't something you protect once. It's something you have to keep protecting actively for the rest of your life, against people who aren't even trying to find you. They just happen to be standing close enough to the truth to trip over it by accident. The loneliest kind of rich. 8 months in, the machine runs exactly the way it's supposed to. Priya's salon is thriving. Your mother's medical bills, the ones she never told you about, that you found out about anyway through a different quiet channel, are gone. A trust-funded scholarship at your old high school sends its first 2 students to college that fall. None of them know it was you. You've become, without meaning to, the most generous person in the lives of everyone you love, and simultaneously, the person who trusts them the least, because trusting them with the truth means trusting them with something that could unravel everything you've built to protect them in the first place. You start dating someone. Her name is Farah. She's sharp, funny, unimpressed by almost everything, which somehow makes you more honest with her than you've been with anyone in 8 months. Almost. 4 months into seeing her, she asks, casually over dinner, not suspicious, just curious, how you afforded to help your sister with her landlord situation, since Priya mentioned it once, thinking you already knew. Your fork stops halfway to your plate. You give her a version of the truth that isn't a lie exactly. A consulting client, an intermediary, a privacy agreement you can't fully explain. She nods slowly. She doesn't push. But something in her face tells you she's just filed this away, the way people file away the first thread of something they'll eventually pull. That night, you lie awake next to her, listening to her breathe, and you think seriously, for the first time, about just telling her everything. The trust, the $347 million, the name that isn't yours on any of it. You don't. You tell yourself it's to protect her. That's true. It's also the easier truth to hold on to than the harder one, that somewhere in 8 months of discipline, the secret stopped being about safety and became about control, the quiet, addictive kind that comes from being the only person in the room who knows the whole shape of your own life. The question you can't outsource. A year in, you sit on the fire escape of an apartment nobody important has ever visited, looking out at a city where you are, by every legal measure, worth more than most of the businesses on the block beneath you. You've fixed everything money can fix. Your sister's business, your mother's health debt, 2 strangers' college educations, your own past quietly, completely erased, and you have never once been thanked by name for any of it. Because you built a life specifically engineered to make gratitude structurally impossible to receive. Farah is asleep inside. She still doesn't know your real name is on nothing. Not one account, not one document, not $1 of the $600 million sitting 2 states over under a name that means nothing to anyone. You think about the version of you that existed 13 months ago, standing in a pharmacy parking lot with $11.42 to his name, who would have told the whole world by morning out of sheer disbelief. That version is gone. What's left is someone excellent at disappearing and less sure, the longer it goes on, whether disappearing was ever really about safety at all. So here's the question you still haven't answered, lying awake most nights, running the math the same way you've run it for a year straight. If the person sleeping in the next room woke up tomorrow and asked you directly whether there was anything you weren't telling her, would you finally say yes? Or would you let the silence protect you for one more year?